Here we are again. May 28th, 2022. It's pretty early in the morning. I was up kind of late last night watching Stranger Things, the new season. A little tired, but here we are. It's kind of cool outside, overcast. It's probably going to rain, a little bit of wind. It feels good. Yesterday was way too hot. Today's question: what is your favorite magazine or publication? Well, that's kind of a stupid question for a journal in this day and age. Like, those don't exist anymore, really. Not outside of like major. I don't know. I'm gonna. So there's two or three magazines that I subscribed to when I was younger. It was Nintendo Power. Nintendo Power, Electronic Gaming Monthly, and GamePro. A little bit of a theme there. Yeah, I know. So, and each one had things in that I liked for different reasons. Nintendo Power was great because it was published by Nintendo, and so they had like the first and foremost word on what was coming out and when it was coming out, and so that was like a good like premium insight into what was coming. However, because it was directly published by Nintendo, there was always kind of a slant. Like, the reviews were never... I mean, I don't think I ever saw a bad review out of Nintendo Power. It was always like at least 4 out of 5 stars for everything. And so you couldn't really trust it for that reason. But it was good to like get the first information on something. GamePro was... so it was slanted in a different sort of way. GamePro was put out... Oh, man. Was it GamePro or was it... Oh, man. Maybe it wasn't GamePro. GamePro was kind of like a... It was... I don't know. It had this, like, renegade feel to it. And it was a little... It was a little less professional. But it had a certain feel to it that was, I don't know, it was kind of cool. It was kind of like the Sega of the video game publication world. And sometimes it was okay to get, but it wasn't my favorite. And in that way, it was very much like Sega. Like, I didn't care for Sega as a child, aside from like the Mortal Kombat version. Or yeah, the Sega version of Mortal Kombat, which was far superior because it was bloody. It was real blood, not just like green whatever, like, or sweat like Nintendo had. So yeah, they were okay. My favorite by far was Electronic Gaming Monthly. They were professional. Their reviews were honest. They had they did like real investigative journalism into the industry, while at the same time they had some fun bits about it. They had this one... Oh man, one of the best parts of that magazine was that they had this guy he went by Sean Baby. I don't know if anybody remembers it. I'm sure some people remember this. He might even still be around. I don't know. But what he would do is he would play awful games, and then he would just give them like scathing reviews, and they were so much fun to read. I listened to him on a podcast once, probably, oh man, maybe 10, 12 years ago. And I didn't care for it because all he did was swear up and down talking about these games, like, oh, this effing game, F this effing game, blah blah blah. But when he had to write for for the magazine, he was much more articulate. I think that having to approach the general public and having them be like, we're a reputable, source. We're probably, saying something like, we're family friendly. So you have to pick your vocabulary much more carefully. And I think it made him a better reviewer. Even though it was obviously fun for him to do, maybe not playing the awful games, but writing the crappy reviews about them was probably kind of fun. It forced him to be a better writer. It forced him to be much more articulate and creative in his insults of these games. And they were so much fun to read. I mean, hearing things like it. This is one of my favorite things he ever said. He said something like, if I put a graham cracker into my PlayStation and it somehow read a game on it, that would be a better game than what I just played. It was hysterical to read, and he wrote all sorts of things like that. So every month that was what we looked forward to in the magazine. I think I remember specifically flipping directly to the back of the magazine where Sean Baby's reviews were, just so I could read those. Also, they had really good lists, like top 10 lists like we have on the internet now. They did that in their magazines. And at the end of the year, end of the fiscal year, let's say, so you would get this this episode or this issue in either March or April. They would do best, top 5 best RPGs of the year, top 5 best blah 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 blah. And I discovered a lot of good games that way. That was kind of like the word of mouth that something was good back in the day before the internet. I was enraged, I remember, when they had top 10 best video game endings ever. And actually, so this is what made me pick up on it. Legend of Zelda Link to the Past was number 2. And that was my favoriteest game of all time at that point. And I was so pissed off. 12-year-old Adam, who does not have the knowledge of the industry that he has now, had not broadened his spectrum mostly beyond the major video game companies and what they put out at that time. So Zelda was number 2, and number 1 went to Final Fantasy, well, it was called 3 at the time, but it's 6. So Final Fantasy 6, best ending of all time. And I was so mad. I was like, there's no freaking way that what is this Final Fantasy game? How did it get... I was like, this stupid, Japanese garbage. Not realizing that, Nintendo was also a Japanese company. All game companies were Japanese companies at that point. But I was like, no, this is trash. This game can't hold a candle. And then I started looking through all the other top 10 lists for that year, and Final Fantasy 6, I'm gonna call it 6. I can't go back to calling it 3 at this point in my life. Final Fantasy 6 was on so many of those lists. I think it got best music in a game, all sorts of crap, and I was like, this is ridiculous. There's no way this game has any right to be on this many of these lists. I was so mad. And then I had played the first Final Fantasy on the original Nintendo, and it was fine, but I was like, this is tedious. There's a grind to the game, and the objectives were kind of nebulous. You had to go, back in the day when games forced you to go around and talk to everybody, and there wasn't go pick up this quest. It was okay, this person's going to say something that's going to lead you, to another part of the game. So I didn't really care for Final Fantasy, and then me and my brother, we rented, from a grocery store, actually, we rented Final Fantasy 4, and started digging into that game, and there was much more of a storyline. There was much more of a coherent path that led you through the game. And we really, really fell in love with that. It was just the graphics were better than the Nintendo, so like it wasn't just make your character or choose a character class, and there was no like character development. Like the characters in that game were really for the time, like they were really fleshed out. It was awesome. So we rented that, and I was like, oh, this is amazing. I didn't think that it could get any better than that game. I was like, oh man, like the story is so engaging. The music is great. And so we rented that a couple of weeks in a row, and then we went to go rent it a third week, and it was gone. And I was so mad. I was so mad at that. It was like, I mean, first of all, because there's always the danger of somebody like, saving over your file on the cartridge. So I was like, oh my god, we're screwed. We're gonna have to start all over on this game. But my brother, to his credit, this was all Tyler's thing. Like he was like, well, we'll get Final Fantasy 3 then. We'll see how that one shapes up. See how that one pans out. And I'm like, begrudgingly, I was like, oh, fine. So I agreed to that. We got that home, and that was the Final Fantasy that truly made me understand that this was a video game series that I needed to have in my life in perpetuity, because it was so good. It was deserving of every list that it got put on. The music, the characters, the graphics, the story, the ending. It truly was. I mean, that is the most well-crafted, artful video game ending of that point in time. And even today, I would argue that it's still one of the best, because it's just so, it's like this 20-minute medley of all the different characters' songs intertwined with each other, and then also showing them, escape from the final area all together, and it culminates so beautifully. But I don't know, like, maybe having read EGM, Electronic Gaming Monthly, at that time, like, it put that game in my head. And even though I was so resistant to it at first, I think there was something about it that made me, like, pay attention to it. Maybe I would have been led to it anyway, because someone rented our beloved Final Fantasy for it that week, and then we got 6 instead, and that was the one that we became obsessed with. I think we went back to 4 like once, and maybe got a little further. I did not beat 4 until way later in life. But man, 6, oh, we had to have that game. We had to. Wow, I went off on a tangent today. This is going to be my longest video aside from my introduction video. This is what happens when you get me talking about video games. Like, I become so passionate, and I just have like all these experiences, and I have all this knowledge about it. Maybe not as much as some, but I have a great deal, I think, compared to the general public, for sure. It is a strong area of expertise for me, and so when I get to flex this muscle, I really like to do it. So I'm sorry if this got a little boring and rambly for some of you, but it's not for you. It's for me. This is my video journal. So I will have another question to answer tomorrow. Goodbye.